target.
Isang barko ang pinalubog ng tropang Pilipino at Amerikano kamakailan. Ito ang unang pagkakataon na naganap ang isang sinking exercise ng isang decommissioned Philippine Navy ship sa Zambales bilang highlight ng drills para sa maritime defense, coastal defense, and maritime domain awareness ng ating mga militar. Nitong Abril, idinaos ang pinakamalaking balikatan exercises sa pagitan ng Pilipinas at ng US kung saan mahigit 17,000 na sundalo ang dumalo. Pangamba ng mga kritiko, pinaigting ng balikatan ng tensyon ng US at China kung saan Pilipinas ang dehado. Tutol din ng China sa bagong Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement o EDCA sites.
The Philippines is advised to unequivocally oppose Taiwan independence rather than stoking the fire by offering the U.S. access to the military bases near the Taiwan Strait if you care about the 150,000 overseas foreign workers.
Pero ayon kay Pangulong Marcos Jr.,
hindi tayo papayag na gamitin ang mga bases natin para sa kahit anong offensive na action. Ito ay para lamang tulungan ang Pilipinas kapag nangangailangan ng tulong ang Pilipinas.
ganun pa man, pinaninindigan ni Pangulong Marcos Jr. ang karapatan natin sa West Philippine Sea, isang usapin na halos binaliwala ng Administrasyong Duterte.
Papel lang yan. Sa totoong buhay, between nations, yung papel, wala yan.
Paano na nga ba tayo maninindigan?
This is Philippine Coast Guard. You are anchored within Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone.
Kanino nga ba ang mga teritoryong pinag-aagawan? Sa Pilipinas o sa China? Kasama po natin para linawin ang usapin na ito, former Supreme Court Justice Antonio Carpio, political analyst Richard Heydarian, former Vice Commander of the Philippine Navy, retired Rear Admiral Rommel. Maraming salamat, gentlemen, for taking the time na pag-usapan ng isang napakahalagang topic na marami ang interesado. Simulan na po natin kay Justice Carpio. Sir, let's start with ano po ba yung tamang paraan ng pag-describe dito sa disputed area na ito? Dahil may mga nalilito pa rin between the terminologies of West Philippine Sea at South China Sea.
The South China Sea is a very big sea. It's about 3.5 million square miles, no? The West Philippine Sea is just a portion of that. Yung West Philippine Sea refers to our territorial sea, our exclusive economic zone, that's 200 nautical miles from our baseline, from the shoreline, and our extended continental shelf.
Hanggang ngayon, we still celebrate the landmark ruling ng UNCLOS, no, na pumabor sa Pilipinas. Pero nakita rin natin na ang China, basically, they're stonewalling and they're saying na walang silbi yung document na yan.
Under UNCLOS, China is a party to UNCLOS. We are a party to UNCLOS. US is not a party, but it says that they will follow UNCLOS. The arbitral award is being invoked by the US, by Japan, Australia, Canada, and the entire EU. In other words, they're saying China must abide with the arbitral award. So the developed countries of the West are behind us now, and that's a lot. And the US and Japan, whenever they sail in the South China Sea, they invoke the award. They said this is the EEZ of the Philippines. We have freedom of navigation here. Those who are saying that nothing happened with our victory, no, they're totally wrong, because the world is now supporting us.
Currently ba, Richard, ano ang masasabi mo tungkol sa nagiging strategy at outlook ng kasalukuyang administrasyon ni Pangulong Bongbong Marcos pagdating sa West Philippine Sea kumpara sa kanyang predecessor, si Pangulong Duterte?
So pagdating dito kay President Marcos Jr., para sa akin, there is an element of balance. Binigyan naman niya ng oportunidad ang China to regain our trust and confidence. Kasi doon sa 6 years ni Pangulong Duterte, wala pong nangyari. Kaya ang biro ko, yung $22.8 billion na pinangako kay Marcos Jr., na-repackage lang yan doon sa 24 billion na binigay kay Digong in 2016 kasi halos walang dumating. So binigyan niya ng oportunidad yung China. Hindi siya aggressive, hindi siya confrontational. In fact, China po, Beijing po yung pinakaunang major foreign visit ni Marcos Jr. Ayaw niya mag-confront sa China kasi kailangan natin ng investment sa kanila para sa kanya at ayaw natin kalabanin ng China dahil ayaw natin ng gera. Pero hindi ibig sabihin dapat mahina lang tayo, wala tayong leverage. Kaya binibuild up niya yung ating security relationship hindi lang sa US pero sa mga iba't ibang bansa rin, which is dapat siguraduhin natin dito sa ilalim ng Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, especially itong expanded. Pero actually, ang EDCA po ay mag-expedite ng modernization of Armed Forces of the Philippines because ang pinakamalaking problema talaga natin is wala tayong even minimum defense credible posture.
Alright. Rear Admiral, napag-uusapan na lang din ng EDCA. Tingin niyo po ba ito ay indication, unang-una, na mas nagiging malapit na tayo sa US? At ano po yung inyong palagay doon sa pag-enhance pa ng ating EDCA?
Siguro ang tamang konteksto dito kung susuriin natin yung mga policy pronouncement ni Presidente Marcos. Ang pundasyon ng kanyang foreign policy at saka security posture is grounded on sinabi niyang it should be premised on our national interest. So I think magandang angkla yun in reference to yung engagement niya with other countries. Kasi dito, nailalatag na yung relasyon ay hindi pupunta ron sa yung nakaraang panahon na relasyon natin with America na parang tayo, independent, sabi nga niyo yung word, nag-independent tayo sa Amerika eh. Now, itong EDCA ngayon, kailangan mo i-konteksto yan sa Mutual Defense Treaty natin sa Amerika eh. Kasi dalawang component yan eh, yung Visiting Forces Agreement, of course, and yung EDCA, yung Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Yung VFA focuses on yung tropa, yung tao na pupunta rito. Ang EDCA, ang focus niyan ay prepositioning ng equipment. Kumbaga, tinatawag po namin sa Navy na problema natin yung tyranny of distance. Meaning, the nearest possible area where the US forces will be coming in case of kailangan i-invoke yung Mutual Defense Treaty would be maybe Guam or Japan. And of course, given na yung the logistics strain para gawin yung ganong type of operation takes time. Okay, so ang pinag-uusapan dito yung response time, yung the ability to respond immediately to crisis. So ang klaro lang dapat, hindi magtatayo yung Amerika ng bases kagaya nung konsepto ng Clark tsaka Subic nung unang panahon. Ang ilalagay nila ay facility or a warehouse na kapaloob sa kampo ng armed forces natin. At yung armed forces natin ay may full control ng kampo na gagalawan. So yung combination ng original fight sites plus yung 4 sites na yon, armed forces po natin ang nagdetermine ng sites na yun, hindi po Amerika. One of the vulnerabilities ng archipelago natin, yung 7 gateway na tinatawag natin, yung 7 archipelagic state natin. Luzon, Strait, Basi Channel, Mindoro, Balabac, San Bernardino, Surigao, Basilan, tsaka Cebu Straits. Pag nagkapikpitan po, yan po yung mga areas na dapat natin i-defensahan. Now, yung kinalalagyan ng Cagayan at Isabela, andun po yung Luzon Strait at Basi Channel. Yung po yung nagkakapit na waterway sa South China Sea at Pacific Ocean. Kasi yun din po pinupunterian ng China eh. Ayaw po natin makipag-away sa China, no? Pero one way of trying to deter a future conflict kung sakali magkaroon ng digmaan, ngayon pa lang gawin natin, i-break mo yung strategy niya.
Of course, ang isa sa mga prominent criticisms dito ay dahil sa ganitong mga galaw, posibleng naglalagay daw tayo ng crosshairs sa Pilipinas at mas lalo pa tayong mapahamak in the name of protecting not the Philippine interest but the United States interest in the region. So gusto ko pong siguro unahin na natin si Justice Carpio kung ano po yung masasabi niyo dun sa ganung klaseng puna.
That is a defeatist policy. Pag sinabi mo na if we strengthen our forces, lalo tayong aawayin ng gigirahin ng China, mag-surrender ka na lang. It is the primary duty of every government to protect the state. So you have to maintain a credible self-defense force. Ang kalaban natin, nuclear-armed eh. Paano natin sasanggain yan? You need a nuclear-armed ally. China has no right to tell us what to do within our territory. And EDCA implements the Mutual Defense Treaty. Mutual defense. Para defense lang. It's not offense. So if China will not attack us, it should not worry because it will not affect them. It's not even useful in the Taiwan Strait because that cannot be used in case the China invades Taiwan. That cannot be used because EDCA is to implement mutual defense of the Philippines. The US, if the US is attacked, hindi naman inaatake ang US if China invades Taiwan.
Gusto ko lang puntahan yung isang recent event kung saan tinutukan ng sinasabing military grade laser yung ating mga tropa dito sa West Philippine Sea. Ang tawag daw nila doon ay gray zone tactics.
The way it's described, it's a gray zone tactics. It describes yung actions ng China using non-military capabilities, lalo na yung Chinese Coast Guard at yung militia, to basically enforce yung kanilang claims doon sa area, sa ating teritoryo, sa ating EEZ. Kaya siya tinawag daw na gray zone tactic is because it operates at a threshold na hindi mo siya pwedeng i-respond in a military sense. Kasi it's not doing anything that would trigger a military response. Okay, kaya gray zone. Now, ang problema ko sa gray zone tactic as a definition or as a concept, nag-create siya ng what we call in the military decision paralysis. Since hindi mo maintindihan yung paano yung pagkalatag ng ganong taktika, hindi ka nga ngayon makagalaw.
Para mas maliwanagan tayo tungkol sa epekto ng gray zone tactics, panoorin natin ito.
Good evening, former U.S. Air Force Colonel Ray Powell, who is now with the Bordenat Center at Stanford University. Thank you so much for being on this program of the Foreign Correspondents Association of the Philippines. How has China utilized gray zone tactics over the years or even decades?
Their actions are deniable and obscure. It's hard for people to point the finger at them and say, you did this, because it's happening outside the view of most of the public. What I will say is if Philippine vessels go near features that China cares about or stations ships near, then they continue to closely shadow those. What China would like to be able to do is it would like to be able to intimidate governments by doing these kinds of things and saying these kinds of things, but basically making it just between them and the Philippine government, for example.
Would you say, though, that China remains aggressive, or has China become more subdued?
I'd say it remains aggressive. It's just changed the way that it remains aggressive. So the fact that you have 25 maritime militia ships within 25 kilometers of Pagasa is not a comfort, right? It just makes them harder to take pictures of. So, I mean, you're still sort of left with the same problem, which, although, when they're over the horizon, they are perhaps less intimidating to the people at Pagasa. But they are still there, right? And they want you to know, they want, especially your government, to know that they're there, because again, their objective in the end is to get the Philippines to abandon the outpost at Pagasa. What they would like to see happen at some point is for some Philippine administration government to come in and say, it's not worth the fight. Let's just let them have it. And then we'll hopefully gain some favor with them.
This is Philippine Coast Guard, PRP Teresa Magbanwa, MRRV 9701. You are sailing within Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone. You are requested to provide the following: name of vessel.
How many ships are we talking about here at the moment?
Well, it depends on where you're talking about. So, for example, the range at Pagasa has been depends on whether they're scattered or whether they're all together. The number at, say, the Mischief Reef Ayungin that I've observed has been sort of closer to about a dozen. We've seen a lot more at Sabina Shoal, which is somewhere around 20, maybe 20 to 25. Recently, I've been tracking more and more up at Iroquois Reef, which is notable because it is right on the verge of Reed Bank, which of course is the area that's been being discussed for joint development. And if I could speculate a little, I wonder if the reason for those 15 or so ships at Reed Bank Iroquois Reef is a sort of a message that, okay, now you have to deal with us when you're talking about Reed Bank. I know you think you're going to develop that on your own, but here's 15 ships to remind you that you have to deal with us. China has not abandoned its gray zone strategy. So it's going to continue, it's going to adapt and continue to push in different ways. I think that the Philippines is wise to continue to expose it and to adapt itself, right? One, that the Philippines should institutionalize a policy of embedded reporters. This is something that has actually worked very well for the U.S. military over the years. And if there are, reporters frequently aboard Philippine Coast Guard ships and aircraft, and even Navy ships and aircraft, then that will, first of all, it will help illuminate what's happening in the West Philippine Sea even more. And second of all, it will make China really have to think twice about how it conducts itself in the proximity of Philippine ships and aircraft, because it never knows when there might be a reporter on board to be able to record the whole thing. And the other thing that I believe strongly that the Philippines should consider is the placement of commercial AIS receivers, terrestrial AIS receivers along the coast, and even out at some of the outposts, say at Pagasa and other places, wherever you can get power and internet. That can only, I think, help further illuminate China's activities, because frankly, the Philippines has nothing to hide. China has lots it wants to hide.
Let me pivot a little bit, Admiral Ong. Para po sa inyo, ano po bang mawawala kapag hinayaan natin na maangkin ng West Philippine Sea?
Number one sa priority natin, we need to recover Panatag Shoal. Okay. Pangalawa is we need to strengthen yung posture natin sa Ayungin Shoal. Kasi itong dalawang areas na to, I call it quasi-blockade, no? Kasi blockade by itself is already an act of war. So I use the term quasi-blockade. Meaning sabihin, piniprevent nila tayo para makapasok at maka-access doon sa yung dalawang areas na yun. Okay? So kailangan natin i-recover yun. Pangalawa, yung economic access natin, yung sovereign exercise of sovereign rights natin sa EEZ natin ay maapektuhan. Fisher folks natin kailangan mong isda para food security issue. We need to tap yung energy resource dito sa Reed Bank. That's energy security. So yun yung mga at least two existential issues that we need to address. And hindi natin magawa yun, hindi natin ma-ensure yung food security natin at saka energy security natin dahil nauubos yung oras natin makipagpatintero sa Tsina dito sa dagat.
We all know that Malampaya will run out of gas in 2 to 3 years. Malampaya supplies 40% of the energy requirement of Luzon. Pag tanggalin mo yung Malampaya, if we don't get the gas in Malampaya, we will have 12 to 14 hours of daily brownout in Luzon. Our schools will close, factories will close, businesses will close. You cannot even work from home because walang power. Naubos na yung Malampaya, our plan was to get the gas in Reed Bank. Kaya lang, China said, amin yung Reed Bank. That's within the 9-dash line. Tribunal said, Reed Bank belongs to the Philippines. That is part of the EEZ of the Philippines. Lahat na oil and gas belong to the Filipino people. So, China drove us into the arms of the US. And we have to get the gas. It's a matter of national survival for the Philippines.
Richard, tanungin lang kita, meron bang mawawala sa atin kung magiging mas hardlining stance natin against China? So bakit natin sila, kumbaga, liniligawan at this point? Ano yung tamang balance nung pagkausap pa rin sa ating mga aliado or yung ating historical allies sa United States, but also keeping warm relations with China?
Whether we like it or not, medyo naging neighbor na natin sila, right? And they could be even more of a neighbor if they try to invade Taiwan, unfortunately. So we need to make sure now we avoid direct conflict or getting dragged into conflict. At the same time, China is going to be soon the biggest economy sa buong mundo. Marami silang mga excess funds. That could help the Philippines in terms of building our basic infrastructure. Pero to be honest, wala pa rin ma-offer ang US sa atin concretely in terms of infrastructure investment. So, limitado pa rin yung ina-offer ng mga ating traditional allies. Kaya nga, the China option should be there. The thing is, first of all, dapat klaruin natin sa mga Chino na you cannot have the Philippines on the cheap. right? I think yun ang gusto nilang mangyari dati under President Duterte, no? Because si President Duterte, nag-forward deploy siya ng lahat ng concessions even though walang kasiguraduhan na magkakaroon ng any kind of serious concessions on any important issue, no? Whether ito dun sa mga big ticket infrastructure, big ticket hindi yung inayos mo lang yung bridge sa Pasig, ginamit mo yung mga Chinese workers tapos kumita yung mga contractor nila. Hindi ganun na. I'm talking about Clark, high-speed railway going to Manila. I'm talking about Mindanao Railway. None of that happened, right? So I think in fairness to President Marcos Jr., na-clarify niya yan nung August or September last year pa lang when nasuspend niya yung 3 railway projects ng China na wala naman nangyari hanggang ano lang yan. Parang on the paper lang siya. But I think the Chinese still didn't take him seriously. Mahalaga din na we make our red lines even clearer. In fairness to President Duterte, not himself, pero yung mga kanyang foreign secretaries, may sinabi sila na 3 red lines. Militarization ng Scarborough Shoal, unilateral development of energy resources dyan sa West Philippine Sea, especially Reed Bank. At yung pangatlong red line natin, supposedly under Duterte, was yung forcible ejection ng ating troops sa Ayungin Shoal and other areas katulad ng Pag-asa. But paano naman siseryoso ng China yung red lines natin kung wala ka naman ability to enforce those red lines? We want to engage with China, but we have to engage from a position of strength, no? Kaya dito kailangan natin yung alyansa natin.
Dahil sa tuloy-tuloy na tensyon at activities ng China, kumusta na kaya ang ating mga mangingisda at ang ating marine ecosystem sa teritoryong pinag-aagawan?
Marami sa mga kapitbahay ko ay mga mangingisda. Lumaki ako na actually nangingisda sila sa West Philippine Sea noong mga nagdaang taon. Nakakausap ko sila. Tinatanong ko, kamusta yung pangingisda nyo sa West Philippine Sea? Ang sabi nila, hindi na nga kami pumupunta doon Natatakot kasi kami.
Hindi na talaga tulad dati na hindi makakuan talaga doon, makalapit. Pero nung ngayon na medyo maluwag na kunti. Tinitingnan lang kami. Tapos pag halimbawa, lalapit kami, didikit sila sa amin, tuloy-tuloy lang kami. Hanggang maabot kami sa punduhan. Wala na, okay na. Tapos, siyempre, nakamonitor yan sila sa amin. Paikot-ikot yan sila sa Calborshire mayroon pa rin inaabol sa loob.
Hindi may harassment pa rin?
Mayroon pa rin.
Yung speedboat nila Nataboy kami, pinapalis kami dito sa Bahura, sa Sikan Tomas.
Delikado man yan. Marami man yun doon mga China.
China Coast Guard 5201. This is Philippine Coast Guard vessel. BRP Malapascua.
Bakit kailangan makapasok sa loob?
Kasi nandoon yung mga isda na magaganda. Na makabigla doon, makarami. Mga malalaking talakitok.
Ang tanong ngayon, ano na ngayon yung pagkukunan ng pagkain ng mga mangingisda na nakadepende dun sa West Philippine Sea? Pag sinabi kasi natin West Philippine Sea, nakakalimutan yata ng lahat na ang West Philippine Sea is the entirety of the west of the Philippines. At kasama dun yung coastal, yung nasa Pangpang. Malaki yung dependence ng Pangpang dun sa ibayong dagat. Ibig sabihin, marami sa mga isda or corals probably na nakikita natin sa west ng Luzon, na nasa Batangas, maaaring pinanganak sila doon sa kalagitnaan ng South China Sea. Napadpad lang yung itlog nila ngayon sa Batangas. Ito yung mga napapakinabangan natin. Sinasabi ng 1990s na ang West Philippine Sea daw ay nagko-contribute ng 20 to 25% doon sa National Capture Fisheries Production. Ibig sabihin, ganun kalaki yung inaambag niya na pagkain sa buong Pilipinas. Pero noong 2018, ang BIFAR, sinabi niya na ang ambag na lang daw ng West Philippine Sea ay nasa 2%. Kailangan nating tanungin talaga yung mga tanong na bakit bumaba yung inaambag na pagkain ng West Philippine Sea? Dahil ba nasisira na yung corals? Maraming ebidensya na nagsasabi na malaki na yung damages sa iba't ibang pag-aaral halimbawa ng MSI, Western Philippines University, at kahit ng mga universidad mula sa China at Vietnam. Sinasabi nila na sa iba't ibang parte ng South China Sea, malaki ang binagsak ng coral cover. Ibig sabihin, gaano kadami yung buhay na coral yung makikita mo sa isang bahura. May mga nagsasabi na from 60% in the 1990s, bumagsak na yung coral cover to 20%. Sa Pag-asa, halos wala kang nang makikitang mayabong na coral reef dahil doon sa mga illegal fishing practices. Sa iba't ibang expedition na ginawa natin, nakakita tayo ng ebidensya ng dynamite fishing Nakakita tayo ng ebidensya ng cyanide fishing. Yung tanong, sinong gumagawa nito? Chinese lang ba? Vietnamese lang ba? O kasama na din yung mga Pilipinong mangingisda?
Anong sagot doon?
Yung lahat eh.
Yung kumpara sa damage na na-inflict na ng China dahil sa reclamation activities nila, how would you compare?
Totoo naman, pag tiningnan natin yung scale o yung laki ng damages o ng aktibidad na ginagawa ng China, siya naman talaga yung may pinakamalaking epekto dun sa mga environments o habitats na meron tayo sa South China Sea. Hindi naman may pagkakaila yun. Actually, yun naman siguro yung magandang i-point out din, na while there is a geopolitical tension happening in the South China Sea, we still need to work with them. And one way to actually join the countries para hatakin uli yung mga bansa na mag-usap, ay pag-usapan natin ng siyensya. Wala namang nagsasabi na hindi totoo na bumababa ang dami ng isda. Wala namang nagsasabi na hindi totoo na nagkakaroon na tayo ng problema at namamatay na yung mga bahura na meron tayo sa South China Sea. So kung lahat naman tayo nakikinabang, bakit hindi natin siya gawing paraan para mag-usap yung ibang bansa? At doon pumapasok yung role ng mga scientificong Pilipino. Kasi we can look at science as a neutral ground eh. Yun kasi yung takot natin, na parang ano pa yung silbi ng pag-uusap natin sa teritoryo kung pagkatapos nating magkasundo tungkol sa teritoryo, wala naman na tayong poprotektahan kasi wala naman tayong nakukuha. Kasi namatay naman na lahat ng resources na gusto nating protektahan sa South China Sea. At yun yung isa sa mga goal, na habang nagkakaroon ng pag-uusap tungkol sa agawan ng teritoryo, pag-usapan din muna natin kung paano natin poprotektahan yung resources na meron tayo.
Okay. Moving forward, kasi malinaw naman na matindi yung ating conflict with China doon sa ating EEZ. Pero at the same time, we can't live without China. Isang particular question ko, yung matagal nang na pag-uusapan na joint exploration dito sa West Philippine Sea. Anyone can comment siguro. Sa tingin niyo po ba, posible ito under the current circumstances? Should we pursue it and should we offer it?
As I said noon palang, skeptical ako sa joint development agreements with China because you have to essentially square a triangle, right? Because China has the whole, I don't know, whatever is their latest version of their shenanigans of 9-dash line. I mean, they're claiming 85% of South China Sea and huge parts of West Philippine Sea, including parts ng Reed Bank or Reto Bank. So para sa kanila yan. Tapos yung meron tayong sariling batas. Diba? We have our national patrimony and economic provisions, which also treats those waters as extension of ours, national territory. Then you have the arbitration award. So there could be no joint development agreement in these overlapping areas because it will either violate two on our side or one on their side. It's just there's no way to work around it.
Justice Carpio, joint exploration.
Yeah, well, we signed an MOU and terms of reference with China during the Duterte administration. Basically, the MOU and the terms of reference ensure, and it's there in the provision, that the activities will fall under the contract system, the service contract system of the Philippines. We made that sure. It will be under the service contract of the Philippines. Why? Because under the service contract system of the Philippines, in every service contract, it's mandated in the law. The first whereas clause is whereas the oil and gas belongs to the Philippines. And there's another provision that this contract shall be governed by Philippine law. So those are the two critical provisions. And that's why I said if China will agree to that, well and good. And they agreed, they signed. But there was a third agreement that should have been signed, the commercial agreement between CNOOC, China National Offshore Company, and Forum Energy. Forum Energy has a service contract for Area 72, which is the Reed Bank. But before it could be signed, China said, wait. Remove the provision that oil and gas belongs to the Philippines and remove the provision that Philippine law will govern the contract. So at the last minute, they said, we will sign only if you remove those two provisions. Of course, we cannot do that. That is against the Constitution, and that will reverse the arbitral award. And that's why Teddy Boy Locsin said to the President, Duterte, just terminate it so that we allow the next administration to start anew. And that's exactly what happened.
Okay. Given all of these developments, gentlemen, what do you think is the next step? So nakita na natin yung current strategy ng administration ni President Marcos Jr. What, if anything, is missing from that strategy, and what do you think should be changed, if anything, doon sa ating tinatahak na landas ngayon sa ating pakikitungo sa China at sa United States?
The most important thing, what I'm waiting now is the Philippine government under President Marcos saying, lifting the moratorium for Forum Energy to send a survey ship to Reed Bank, and instructing the Navy and the Coast Guard to protect the survey ship and the drilling ship when they go there.
Yeah.
Of course, we have to orchestrate with the Americans a joint patrol at the same time.
I think we really have to have a whole of nation approach to this. Hindi pwede umasa lang tayo sa ating presidente or sandatahang lakas para magkaroon tayo ng sapat na preparations on the issues kasi we are in the middle of multiple flashpoints, no? Meron yung Taiwan, meron yung West Philippine Sea, meron pang technological wars between US and China, so dapat talaga dito we have a president who is honest with the Filipino people that we're facing a chaotic era, and accordingly lahat tayo dapat mag-cooperate together to make sure that we uphold our national interests, whether in terms of developing our capabilities, whether in terms of building resilience, against any sabotage activities. And we have to prepare our kids, education, basic education pa lang. We have to give them that kind of basic understanding of anong pinoprotektahan natin. Otherwise, we'll be vulnerable to disinformation. Otherwise, we'll not be resilient to sabotage. Otherwise, we'll be completely unprepared for any potential conflict down the road, which we, of course, want to deter and avoid as much as possible.
Okay, on my part, I think nailatag na naman ni President Marcos yung strategic direction niya in terms of national security and foreign policy. So I think what he needs to work on is build yung team niya that will execute yung strategic direction niya. Hindi pwede yung pinuno, pag bitaw mo ng salita, ikaw na rin yung mag-execute hanggang matapos sa dulo. Kailangan meron kang team na tutulong sa'yo para yung idea mo o yung konsepto mo ma-implement para ma-prepare yung bansa at saka yung gobyerno natin sa lahat ng potential na pwede mangyari na gaya sinabi ni Richard, both the kinetic and the not kinetic challenges that might confront our country.
Maraming salamat, Justice Carpio, Richard, Heydarian, and Rear Admiral Rommel Ong. Mahalagang palakasin ang ating pamahalaan ng relasyon natin sa ibang bansa tulad ng China at ng Estados Unidos para maisulong ang ating pambansang interes. Pero dapat gawin ito nang hindi nalalagay sa alanganin ng ating kapakanan at soberanya. Maging mapagmatsyag tayo sa mga aksyon ng ating liderato at sa mga banta ng ibang estado sa pag-angkin ng ating teritoryo. Maging mapanuri din tayo sa mga nasasagap nating impormasyon tungkol sa maselang usaping ito. Sila ba ay nag-aasik lamang ng takot o nagsasabi ng totoo? Lagi nating tandaan na tayo-tayo ang magkakakampi rito at walang duda na ang West Philippine Sea ay pag-aari ng Pilipinas at sa ating mga Pilipino. Kailangan nating panghawakan ang katotohanan ito. Ako po si Araullo para sa Think Talk. Magandang gabi.